Picture this, you're building your dream home, settling into a nice, close-knit community.
Sounds idyllic.
Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
Only to discover that it's all built on top of a toxic wasteland.
Oh, wow.
That is the unsettling reality of Love Canal.
Yeah.
And we are diving deep today into firsthand accounts, news reports, and scientific analyses to try to figure out how this environmental disaster unfolded.
Right.
But it's more than just a history lesson.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how citizen activism, driven by real people just like you and me,
Yeah.
uncovered this ticking time bomb and then pushed for change.
Right.
So,
Well, what's so fascinating about Love Canal is that it was just a typical working class neighborhood in Niagara Falls, New York. This wasn't some, industrial site
right,
tucked away in a remote location.
yeah.
This was people's homes, their lives built around what was once a chemical waste dump site,
Oh, wow.
operated by the Hooker Chemical Company.
And looking at these sources, it seems like there were some early warning signs,
Oh, yeah.
but they were almost brushed aside.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there were definitely some red flags. Residents reported these strange odors,
Okay.
almost chemical-like,
Yeah.
and some even found these chemicals seeping into their basements.
Oh, wow.
But it was easy to dismiss these as, isolated incidents.
Right.
The bigger picture, the true extent of the contamination, it remained hidden for years.
Hidden until a group of residents, a lot of them mothers, like Lois Gibbs,
Right.
started to connect the dots.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious about their initial efforts to raise awareness.
Yeah.
What was the response like? What were they up against?
Unfortunately, they were facing a wall of bureaucracy and a general reluctance to even acknowledge there was a problem.
Oh, wow.
So the initial government response was unfortunately more about downplaying the risks
Okay.
than taking any immediate action.
Got it.
And officials argued that the contamination levels, they just weren't significant enough to warrant a major concern.
Yeah.
And evacuations were extremely limited.
So it sounds like the residents were hitting a brick wall.
Yeah.
They were seeing these potential health risks, but the authorities just weren't taking them seriously.
Exactly. And this is where Elena Thornton comes in.
Okay.
She was a resident of Griffin Manor,
Okay.
a public housing project near Love Canal,
Got it.
and seeing how her community was also at risk but largely ignored,
Right.
she founded the Concerned Love Canal Renters Association
Okay.
and fought tirelessly to ensure that their concerns were heard.
It's amazing how individuals can step up like that and become advocates,
Yeah.
especially for communities that might not have the resources
Right.
or the platform to fight for themselves.
It's about recognizing that everyone deserves a safe and healthy environment,
Yeah,
regardless of their background.
for sure.
And Elena Thornton's leadership was crucial
Yeah.
in amplifying the voices of the Griffin Manor residents
Right.
and ensuring that they were included in any potential solutions.
Okay, so we've got residents starting to organize,
Yeah.
but they're facing this massive challenge of proving the extent of the contamination.
Right.
How do they even approach that?
Well, one of the most intriguing aspects of this story is that it really highlights the importance of citizen science.
Okay.
Lois Gibbs, driven by a desire to protect her children and her community,
Yeah.
started gathering data in a very grassroots way.
I'm seeing something here about a homemade map.
Yes.
What was that all about?
So frustrated by the lack of official action, Gibbs decided to take matters into her own hands.
Okay.
And she created a map of her neighborhood
Okay.
and started marking the locations of reported illnesses
Okay.
using different symbols for different conditions.
It's fascinating how she took this simple approach,
Yeah,
something anyone could do,
right.
and turned it into this powerful tool for advocacy.
Absolutely. And what emerged from this map was a chilling pattern.
Okay.
The clusters of illnesses, particularly cancers, miscarriages, and birth defects, they all seem to align with the paths of what are called swales.
Swales.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay, so swales are essentially underground channels formed by rainwater.
Okay.
And while they were filled in during the development of Love Canal,
Right.
Dr. Beverly Pagan, a biologist who had been studying the area,
Okay.
she suspected that they could still be acting as conduits for the toxic waste,
Oh, wow.
allowing it to spread beyond the immediate vicinity of the canal.
So this map, created by Gibbs,
Yeah.
based on anecdotal evidence from the community,
Right.
potentially started to validate Dr. Pagan's scientific theory.
It's a testament to how different forms of knowledge can complement and reinforce each other,
Yeah.
both scientific expertise and community observations.
Right.
And it highlights the importance of being open to these unconventional sources of information
For sure.
particularly when those in power are dismissive or reluctant to acknowledge a problem.
And it seems like the community was facing pushback,
Yeah.
not only from the government, but also within the scientific community itself.
Sadly, yes.
Right.
Despite the concerning patterns emerging from the map,
Right.
Dr. Pagan faced considerable skepticism from both officials and some of her colleagues.
Wow.
They dismissed her swales theory as speculation,
Oh,
making it incredibly difficult for her to secure the resources and funding she needed
yeah.
to conduct more comprehensive research.
It's interesting how those in power can sometimes hold on to existing paradigms.
Yeah.
Even when compelling evidence challenges those assumptions.
Right.
They may have been viewing the residents' concerns through a very narrow lens,
Possibly.
perhaps as an overreaction or hysteria.
It's a phenomenon we often see
Yeah.
when dealing with complex issues, especially when they involve challenging these established norms
Right.
or questioning the actions of powerful entities.
Right.
Evidence that doesn't fit neatly into existing frameworks
Yeah.
can be easily dismissed or minimized.
And tragically, in the midst of all of this, a young boy named John Allen Kenney became the face of this devastating impact of the Love Canal contamination. Can you tell us about what happened to him?
So John Allen was only 7 years old,
Oh, wow.
and he lived just outside the designated evacuation zone.
Okay.
And despite his young age, he started experiencing these recurring health issues, particularly with his kidneys.
Oh, gosh.
And his condition continued to deteriorate,
Yeah.
and sadly, he eventually passed away.
That must have been just a horrific ordeal for his family
Absolutely.
and a wake-up call for the entire community.
It was a heartbreaking turning point in the Love Canal story.
Yeah.
John Allen's death brought the human cost of this environmental disaster into sharp focus.
Right?
It was no longer just about abstract data and scientific theories.
Yeah.
It was about a child's life cut short, a family's grief, and a community's growing fear.
It's moments like these that really make us realize the true impact of these events.
Yeah.
You know, behind the headlines and the statistics
Yeah.
are real people, real families whose lives are irrevocably altered.
Right.
It's a powerful reminder that environmental issues aren't just these abstract concepts.
Yeah.
They have very real and often devastating consequences
Absolutely.
for individuals and communities.
And in the case of Love Canal, John Allen's tragic death became a rallying cry for justice,
Yeah.
a symbol of the urgency and the moral imperative behind the fight for a safe and healthy environment.
Wow.
It added an undeniable emotional weight to the residents' demands for accountability and action.
So at this point, we have residents starting to organize. We have a
Right.
scientist trying to prove her theory about how the contamination is spreading
Yeah.
and a community reeling from the loss of a child. But the truth about the chemicals lurking beneath the surface of Love Canal
Yeah.
was far more sinister than anyone initially imagined.
Right.
And we'll delve into that shocking revelation in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
So we left off with the Love Canal community dealing with mounting health concerns and a tragic loss.
Right.
But the full scope of the danger they were in,
Yeah.
it was still coming to light. And this is where investigative journalist Mike Brown enters the picture.
Right.
He uncovered something pretty disturbing about those chemicals dumped in Love Canal.
Yeah, he did.
Can you tell us about that?
Brown's reporting was really a game changer.
Okay.
Through persistent digging and questioning, he discovered that hooker chemical had buried a staggering amount,
Yeah.
200 tons of a chemical called 2,004,5-trichlorophenol in the canal.
Wow. Okay.
And what's really alarming is that this chemical,
Yeah.
it was a key component in Agent Orange,
Agent Orange.
the notorious defoliant used during the Vietnam War.
That's a chilling connection.
It is.
Agent Orange has been linked to so many serious health problems.
Oh, yeah.
What did this revelation mean for the residents of Love Canal?
Basically, it confirmed their worst fears.
Okay.
2,004-5-trichlorophenol is highly toxic on its own,
Right.
but it's also a precursor to dioxin, one of the most potent carcinogens we know of.
So suddenly they weren't just dealing with a mix of potentially harmful chemicals.
Right.
They were living on top of a potential cancer cluster in the making.
Pretty much, yeah.
So with this bombshell revelation, did the authorities finally take decisive action?
Well, it wasn't quite that simple.
Okay.
Despite the confirmed presence of dioxin and, mounting pressure from the community,
Right.
the official response was still remarkably slow and hesitant.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, there seemed to be a reluctance to fully acknowledge the severity of the situation.
Why do you think that was?
Well, perhaps due to political considerations or maybe a desire to avoid widespread panic.
That's incredibly frustrating.
It is.
You would think hard evidence of such a dangerous substance would trigger immediate action.
You would think so.
What were the authorities' main arguments against a full evacuation at that point?
Well, there was a mix of, bureaucratic inertia and what might be seen as misplaced priorities. Some officials argued that the science on dioxin's long-term health effects was still inconclusive.
Oh, wow.
Despite the growing body of evidence linking it to cancer and other serious illnesses.
Right.
Others were concerned about the economic repercussions of relocating so many families and the potential impact on property values.
So it sounds like a classic case of those in power prioritizing political and economic interests over the health and well-being of the community.
Yeah, it raises those important questions about, who gets to decide what level of risk is acceptable.
Right.
Especially when those making the decisions aren't the ones facing the potential consequences.
Exactly.
In Love Canal, it was the residents who were bearing the brunt of the contamination, while those in positions of authority seemed more concerned with, managing the situation than truly addressing the root of the problem.
So how did the residents respond to this continued inaction, especially in light of the dioxin revelation?
They became even more determined to fight for their community's safety. Lois Gibbs, fueled by a mix of anger and desperation, ramped up her activism, organizing protests, blocking work crews, and even getting arrested in her efforts to force the government's hand.
It's remarkable to see how these residents, a lot of them ordinary people with no prior experience in activism, became such powerful advocates for their community. What factors do you think contributed to their effectiveness?
I think their power came from this combination of, grassroots organizing, compelling personal stories, and the sheer weight of evidence they had gathered. Remember the Housewife data we discussed earlier? That meticulously collected information, dismissed by some as anecdotal, actually played a crucial role in validating Dr. Pagan's scientific findings.
They took it upon themselves to gather the data that the authorities weren't collecting, essentially conducting their own citizen science project.
Exactly. And when Dr. Pagan analyzed that data, she found significantly higher rates of illness, particularly along the paths of the swales, providing further support for her theory that the contamination was spreading beyond the immediate vicinity of the canal.
So this community-driven data collection, combined with the mounting evidence from investigative reporting, and the tragic story of John Allen Kenney created a narrative that was impossible to ignore.
It did.
It's a testament to the power of citizen science.
Absolutely.
And community involvement. They filled the gaps where official data collection and research were lacking. It's a reminder that we don't always need to wait for experts or authorities to tell us what's happening in our own communities. We have the power to investigate, to collect data. And to advocate for change ourselves.
Absolutely. And in the case of Love Canal, this community-driven effort played a crucial role in shifting the narrative and forcing the government to finally take more decisive action.
So even then, it was a long and arduous battle.
It was.
And the ultimate resolution wasn't without its own controversies and complexities. Before we delve into the aftermath and the long-term consequences of Love Canal, let's take a step back and talk about the emotional toll this must have taken on the residents. They were not only dealing with serious health concerns, but also facing a bureaucratic system that was slow to respond. And at times even dismissive of their concerns.
True.
How did they cope with the stress and uncertainty of this situation?
Well, the psychological impact of living in a contaminated environment can be profound and long-lasting. And the residents of Love Canal were experiencing not only the physical health effects of exposure to toxic chemicals, but also the constant anxiety of not knowing the full extent of the danger they faced.
That's got to be terrifying.
It is. They were living in a state of perpetual uncertainty. Their lives disrupted, their homes devalued, their futures uncertain.
It's a reminder that environmental disasters aren't just about statistics and scientific data. They are about people's lives, their hopes, their dreams, their sense of security.
And in Love Canal, that sense of security was shattered. They were betrayed by the very systems that were supposed to protect them. Their trust in government and industry completely eroded. And this created a deep sense of anger and frustration. And even a profound sense of grief for the loss of their community, their homes, and their way of life.
It's heartbreaking to think about what they went through.
It is.
Their lives were turned upside down.
Yeah.
And they had to fight tooth and nail for every bit of recognition, every ounce of support.
They did, and their resilience is truly remarkable.
It is.
Faced with a seemingly insurmountable challenge,
yeah,
they refused to be silenced. They organized, they advocated, they demanded accountability.
Wow.
Their story is really a testament to the power of the human spirit to overcome adversity,
Yeah.
even when the odds are stacked against them.
So with all of this mounting pressure, the horrifying truth about the chemicals,
right,
and the community's unwavering determination,
yeah,
what finally happened? Did the government step up and provide the help that these families so desperately needed? We've been talking about the mounting pressure on authorities, the horrifying truth about the chemicals, and the community's unwavering determination.
Yeah.
So what finally tipped the scales? Did the government step in and provide the help that these families so desperately needed?
It wasn't like a sudden shift.
Okay.
More like a series of events that finally led to more substantial action.
Okay.
In the spring of 1979, President Jimmy Carter declared a federal emergency in Love Canal.
Oh, wow.
This meant financial assistance for relocation.
Okay.
But even with this declaration, the process was still incredibly slow.
That's surprising. You'd think a presidential declaration would expedite things.
Right.
What were the main roadblocks at that stage?
Well, the challenges were multifaceted.
Okay.
There were bureaucratic hurdles, of course.
Right.
But also ongoing debates about the scope of the evacuation.
Yeah.
Who qualified for assistance and what form that assistance should take.
Okay.
It wasn't just a matter of, moving families.
Right.
It was also about addressing their health concerns.
Yeah.
Finding them suitable housing.
Right.
Dealing with the economic fallout of leaving their homes and possessions behind.
It sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It was.
Compounded by the emotional distress these families were already experiencing.
Absolutely. And the situation was further complicated by the fact that there was no real precedent for handling an environmental disaster of this magnitude.
Wow.
The Love Canal crisis was, in many ways, uncharted territory.
Right.
And the government was essentially trying to create a response system on the fly.
So amidst all this chaos and uncertainty, what ultimately happened to the residents of Love Canal were they all eventually relocated?
Over the summer of 1979, over 700 families were finally relocated.
Wow.
But this wasn't the end of the story.
Okay.
The Love Canal disaster had a lasting impact on environmental policy and regulation in the United States, serving as a catalyst for significant change.
This is where the Superfund program comes in.
Correct. Exact.
That was a major turning point in environmental law.
The Superfund program, established in 1980, was a direct response to the horrors of Love Canal.
Right.
And it was designed to clean up toxic waste sites across the country.
Yeah.
And importantly, hold polluters accountable for the damage they caused.
It seems like Love Canal forced a national reckoning.
Yeah.
With the legacy of industrial pollution and the hidden dangers lurking in so many communities.
It exposed a systemic problem.
Right.
For decades, industries had been disposing of hazardous waste with little regard for the long-term consequences.
It's unbelievable.
And Love Canal brought those consequences into sharp focus.
Yeah.
Making it impossible to ignore the environmental and health risks associated with such practices.
But Love Canal wasn't just about government action and policy changes.
Right.
It also highlighted the power of ordinary citizens to drive change.
The residents of Love Canal, especially the mothers who led the charge, were incredibly effective activists. They were tenacious, they were resourceful, and deeply committed to protecting their families and their community.
Absolutely.
They refused to be silenced or ignored.
It's inspiring.
It is.
They really embody the idea that you don't need a fancy title or political connection to make a difference. It was their persistence in gathering data, organizing protests, and raising public awareness that ultimately forced those in power to pay attention.
Absolutely. Their story is a testament to the power of grassroots activism and citizen science. Yeah. They challenged the status quo, demanded accountability, and ultimately helped to create a safer, healthier environment for themselves and for countless others across the country.
Looking back on Love Canal, what do you think are some of the most important takeaways for us today?
Well, I think Love Canal serves as a stark reminder that environmental disasters don't just happen.
Right.
They're often the result of a series of decisions or indecisions that prioritize short-term gains over long-term consequences.
A tough lesson to learn.
It is. It highlights the dangers of complacency, the importance of vigilance, and the need to hold both industry and government accountable for protecting public health and the environment.
It also shows us that we all have a role to play in preventing such tragedies from happening again.
Absolutely.
Whether it's staying informed about potential risks in our own communities, supporting environmental organizations, or simply raising our voices when we see something wrong. We can all contribute to creating a safer, healthier world.
Love Canal is a story of both tragedy and resilience.
It is.
It's a reminder of the devastating consequences of environmental neglect, but it's also a testament to the power of community action. And the enduring human spirit.
Absolutely.
It's a story that continues to resonate today.
It does.
Urging us to be more mindful of our environmental footprint.
Right.
And to work together to protect the planet for generations to come.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the toxic legacy of Love Canal, it's clear that this story is far from over.
Right.
It's a reminder that the choices we make today, both individually and collectively, have a lasting impact on our environment and our health.
They do.
It's a call to action, urging us to be informed, engaged, and unwavering in our commitment to creating a sustainable and just future for all.